Support for the Civic CitV network comes from listeners and viewers like you and organizations such as the Rita Allen Foundation, which invests in transformative ideas in their earliest stages to leverage their growth and promote breakthrough solutions to significant problems. Go to ritaallen.org to learn more.
Mapping the global landscape of civic science by dissecting new insights from researchers, practitioners, and leaders in academia, government, for-profit, and nonprofit organizations. This is Questions of the Day with Fanuel Muindi.
All right, welcome to the program. I'm your host, Fanuel Muindi. In our program, Questions of the Day, that is part of this growing Civic CitV network, we talk to practitioners and scholars who are doing really wonderful work in the landscape of civic science, this interface of science and society, where we're bridging and connecting and trying to solve societal and community problems at the local level. Now, I'm very excited to be joined today by Dawn Pickerton, who's the president and principal organizer of LynnLab. And LynnLab is a nonprofit community biology lab, and we'll learn more about that, providing STEM learning experiences, and it's also a biomaker space in the city of Lynn, Massachusetts. Dawn, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Fanuel. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Yay. So, Dawn, let's just start with your background. How did you end up being the president and principal organizer of LynnLab? And I understand you are involved in a couple of other initiatives that are related. So just tell us that backstory a little bit.
Well, I think it's probably a product of a failed retirement. So I was a high school biology teacher for many years in Revere, Mass. I taught biology and I started a biotech program there. Teaching was a second career for me. I won't go into the first one, but I loved teaching. But I left in 2020 along with COVID, and I was able to take some benefits for that, fortunately or unfortunately. I'm of a certain age. But I can't seem to stop working. I love being an educator. I love being engaged in science and science education. So after I left teaching, I had the good fortune of participating in a lot of the professional development programs that are offered to teachers in the Boston area, particularly in the Kendall Square area by the institutes and the colleges and so forth. So I know a lot of people in that space. And so I sent out my resume, my CV after I left teaching, and I was had the good fortune of picking up a number of consulting clients in education at various institutes. And so I started doing that work. I've done some work for Broad Institute and Whitehead, and now I work as the Director of Education and Outreach at the Reagan Institute, which is an immunology research center based in Kendall. It's part of Mass General Hospital. And I do all kinds of education programming there, internship programming, a science club for teenagers. But LynnLab, the idea for that started a number of years ago. So I would say maybe it was 2017, I attended my first community biology summit at MIT. And I didn't even know that such a thing existed at that time. But there's an entire network of community biology spaces sort of built around this makerspace concept. And I was so excited. I felt like I was home when I went to that group because these people were speaking my language. I totally got where they were coming from. And I love this idea of bringing science to the community and bringing biology, particularly to the community and engaging the community in what I feel like is an extremely exciting endeavor, whether it's through a career or just for fun or just to explore. So I remember having a conversation with friends at a local brewery that just started up in Lynn. And one of the fellows there was starting up a makerspace, which exists today. It's fantastic. It's called the Brickyard Collaborative. It's really a fantastic, it's a traditional makerspace, like a shop. But we talked about, hey, could we include some biology in that makerspace? And I had gotten some experience through, so in Cambridge, there's Boss Lab, which is another community biospace that I've met at this community biology summit. I thought we could do something like this in Lynn. I think it would be fantastic. Because Lynn, I live right next door. I live in Swampscott, but it's just a great city. It's got incredible opportunity. So anyway, this idea kind of floated around for a while, and I was busy still teaching at the time, and it just kind of didn't really go anywhere. But meanwhile, I got to know some of the folks in this community biospace, the Baltimore Underground Science Space called Bugs, which is a tremendous space, a Gen Space in New York, and there's some on the West Coast. And so I think it was about a year and a half ago, the city of Lynn was designated bio-ready by an organization called Mass Bioed. And that says that basically they have the infrastructure and the zoning and some of the strategic ideas in place to bring biotech and pharma as an economic driver to the city. And I thought, well, this is the perfect time to kind of launch LynnLab because the city's ready for this. So I pulled together a meeting about 1.5 years ago of some key stakeholders from the community college, from the city, actually friends at Northeastern University, the BioConnects New England, which is operated by Jared O'Clair out of Northeastern. Brought a whole bunch of people together to say, what can we do here in Lynn around building this lab idea? And so that's really what kicked us off. I would say it was about 1.5 years ago. And that's where the name LynnLab came from, was out of that meeting. I can't remember if it was me or someone else who had the name, but it just kind of rolls off the tongue. LynnLab says what it is. So that's really kind of how it got started. It's a kind of a side endeavor for me. I'm very passionate about it. I'm really excited that there are models out there that I can learn from. Mm-hmm. This is not a new thing. I didn't create this idea. I just wanted to bring it to Lynn. And so one of the things about Lynn that's different from Boston or Cambridge or some of the other cities that are closer in to where all the biotech hub is that Lynn doesn't really get a lot of love from science. It's just too far away, right? So, a lot of these institutions will support Cambridge or Boston, and kudos to them. I think it's fantastic that they do this work. But Lynn's been a little out of range for some of these companies. So there's just not a lot of science activity happening there for the community. There's some great art spaces, but science just hasn't gotten in there. So I'm really trying to make that happen there.
Yeah. Thank you for that backstory, right?
Sorry, it was a little bit long. I'm sorry, but
no, I love the origin stories. Can you tell us about the people in the LynnLab? As you're talking, I just kept imagining, you have artists, scientists, right, and other entrepreneurs. Tell us about who is coming to LynnLab.
Right. Well, so right now I have to be honest, we don't actually physically have a physical space at this point. We are working with the city to identify a physical space. And so what we decided to do, we do what we can. So right now we're running a series of pop-ups. As a matter of fact, I have one this afternoon that I'm going to be getting to, where we bring science activities often to children or young people, teenagers. It's also available to adults. I go to different, festivals and things like that. But the people I've gotten involved, so I have a board of directors. They're all mostly science focused people. I have one fellow who works for Fisher. We've got some people who are at Northeastern, some academics, some teachers. A lot of high school students have helped out and have volunteered. So it's really people who are on board with this idea and who are willing to spend some time and volunteer their time to do the work. So.
Yeah, because volunteers are the heart of what you're building, right?
100%. And I would have to say, if there's a critical success factor, there are several, but one of them is having the volunteer support, because it's all these labs that, if you've heard about GenSpace or Bugs or Big Boss Lab, they're all volunteer run. And that's what we're really looking for. And I've had pretty good success having volunteers come and help out at events. I think what's really going to need to happen is volunteers to come and help out with some of the more leadership, management, strategic types of things that are happening. There's a small group of us now, but we're all busy people. So, more folks that can come in and sort of help at that level would be really great. Yeah. And it's got to take that passion and belief in it. Yeah.
Right. So is the vision, because right now you're doing, it sounds like science outreach events, right? Where you're engaging young people. Yep. Is the vision to have a physical space, of course, as you mentioned, you're doing that, and then to actually then begin to bring in these entrepreneurs and
right. Yeah. So we're starting out in the education space and a lot with young people, because to be honest with you, that's where the funding is. And I don't really have too much difficulty getting funding to operate these sorts of things. I think that the next leap forward here is going to actually be to have a physical space somewhere in Lynn. And again, I'm trying to work with the city on this, identify a location. It might take some time, something very low cost, and actually then have a physical space and then establish programming at the space and expand that programming out. So maybe we'll have like a lecture series or some sort of a conversation series to talk about science issues that are relevant to the city. For example, we have issues with our beaches up here. And beach pollution. There are just, urban problems around brownfields and so forth. There's, the food project is in Lynn. Maybe we can partner with them. So there's lots of opportunities to partner with other organizations. And because Lynn has some fairly well-established arts programming through Raw Arts and Lynn Arts, we've been able to partner with them to make that connection, that intersection between science and art that I think is crucial in a community space. So Yeah, it's at some point we hope to have a physical space, have programming there. There could be classes. Let's say you wanted to learn, basic molecular biology, how to work with DNA. That's fairly straightforward and not too expensive to do. And places like GenSpace are doing this all the time. You can do personal genomics, for example, or you could do environmental genomics, something called DNA barcoding, where you look at an environment and try to identify the different types of organisms there. In Baltimore, they're doing a DNA barcoding of Baltimore Harbor, and I think that'd be a tremendous project to do in Hot Bay or Broad Sound, something like that, to try to identify.
And that's the bugs program, right?
Yeah, that's the program at Bugs, the Baltimore space. They're doing this Baltimore barcoding project. It's very cool. And I've learned to model after what other people done. As a teacher, that's what you learn, right? You just kind of like see what other people done and say, well, how can I work with that? So.
Although I wonder, though, I'm assuming you're talking to local community members, right? And I'm curious, what are they telling you? Is this something that they want? You mentioning that there are these local issues that are there, right? And I'm just curious, how do they see the community biology lab once it's set up in a physical space? And
I've certainly gotten a lot of enthusiastic vocal support from people in the communities, from the city, from the community college, from the arts communities that are here. Again, we're partnering with the Lynn Museum to do a program for them. And so I try to partner with as many of the existing community groups as possible. I think everyone agrees, that I've talked to anyway, is that the idea behind LynnLab is something that the city needs and wants. And the mayor's office is very much enthusiastic about this. And so I've gotten a lot of, again, sort of verbal support. Trying to turn that into more material support, but I see that happening. The other thing I'm trying to do is engage as many people directly who live in Lynn or involved in Lynn on the project. So my board members, people like that, people that are volunteers, I'm really seeking out people that live in the city. Now I live just really literally, I can see Lynn practically from my backyard. So I live in Swampscott, which is the next town, but Lynn is sort of my urban center, and I feel very, very connected to it. But this is the trick, right? I don't want to be seen as some outsider that's coming in saying, this is what you people need, right? So it can't be that. And if it turns into that, then it's not happening. So I really want to make sure that that community support is there and that people are enthusiastic about it. And if it turns out that they're not and they don't want it, well, who am I to say? But I really think they're there. And I think people really want to do that.
And I think you mentioned even the barcoding initiative, right? I think you probably may have to just let the community decide what is important, what do they want to work on,
right?
And the people that are using the spaces and so forth. So you're kind of in the early stages, right? You're setting things up, and partnerships. You've been mentioning this a couple of times. Partnerships is key. The ecosystem there. You said there's some art organizations that are there. Can you tell us a little bit more about who is there and how are you intentionally and strategically plugging into that? Because it sounds like you are really being intentional about this.
Right. So. I will say for the first year, we were on like a fast boil with trying to get this thing going, getting it all established, and we've simmered a little bit, but we're not right now. We really got hit the ground running. So who we partnered with the city planning department. We've partnered with Raw Artworks, who is a long established arts program in the city focusing on young people. And I believe it sort of started out as an art therapy sort of a thing. So it's more around, it's not just about kids creating art. It's around using art to help identify themselves and build their lives. We're working with the Lynn Museum. We've worked with the local YMCA, did a program with the YMCA, which is a fantastic new facility. And we have reached out to other organizations like the library and the schools. The schools are interesting. I've been involved a little bit in some of the things that are happening with the schools. They're trying to build some new programming there, and I've gotten involved a little bit with that. As a teacher, I understand the limitations that schools have with working with outside organizations like mine. They've got their hands full trying to run the programs that they've got. And so it's been a little bit more of an effort to get directly involved with the schools, but I have teachers and administrators there who are certainly supportive of what we're doing.
Yeah. So thinking like 10 years from now, what is your hope for LynnLab?
So I'd like to see an active facility in downtown that's known, that's a part of the community, that brings resources to the community, that adds value for people. I would like to see as many people as possible being involved in our programming, either as consumers or as, actual participants coming in and say, hey, I have an idea. I want to try something out. Think of these community labs as biomaker spaces. Now, a little bit of a twist for us is that Boss Lab, I don't know if you've talked to anybody from Boss Lab, but they've been around for a while, and they definitely have an educational component, but they're in a community where there's a lot of science people, and a lot of the people that are involved there are people who are involved in science who, maybe they have an idea, but they work for a biotech or a pharma, and they can't actually do anything with that idea at their bench at work. So they can come into Boss Lab and it's like a pre-incubator kind of thing. I would love to get to that point. I think it's realistically, I have to look further to see whether we have really a critical mass of people who would do that. Certainly the makerspace, the Brickyard Collaborative has engaged a ton of people. They're a very active place. And so, I'm not 100% sure yet with LynnLab whether that'll happen, but I do think there are enough people who would participate. And I definitely, have enough connections to know that, let's say we wanted to have someone come in and give a talk on, well, it's no longer as topical as it was, but, we could have had somebody come in and give a talk about, how vaccines work, for example, dispelling some myths that people have and some misconceptions that people have around science, without being pedantic.
Right. I think, the co-creation aspect and co-designing is really interesting for me when you think about community biolabs. Right? Different people are coming together, and there are problems, right, within the communities that they're trying to solve, and then do projects in that dimension. So I find that really appealing. And then in your motto, right, so LynnLab, it says science for everybody. Right. And so I think that kind of makes the point that science belongs in the community, right? It's not like it's been produced by a certain group out there and eliminated. And totally.
And as a science teacher, I mean, especially working with primarily underrepresented and students of color and minority students, they often don't see themselves in science, because when they think about science, they think about, quite frankly, people who look like me. So I don't know, maybe it's a little ironic, but it's like, what I have learned is that anybody can do science. And, the conception of a scientist as someone who's gotten PhD and gone to grad school and all these things, and then they're a scientist. It's just not true. I mean, there are so many levels that people can engage in a fun and an exciting way in science at all levels. And here's the other thing I'll point out, and people have heard me say this before, but I always turn to my kind of historical mentor in all this, and not someone I ever met, but Stephen Jay Gould, who was a evolutionary biologist at Harvard many long years ago. And his whole thing was, I think it was after Einstein had died, and they put Einstein's brain in a bottle or something. And he says, I don't really care about how Einstein's brain was shaped or formed or what it contains. What I'm more concerned about is that, people of equal quality have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. I mean, that's literally what he said. And so, I want to, I think we as a people really can't afford to miss somebody's good idea. And so we need to be out in the community to say, hey, what have you thought? And what's your perspective here? Because, one group of people has one perspective based on their lived experience. Another group of people has completely different perspective that is just as valid and may offer real solutions. And I think, we owe it to ourselves as human beings to sort of capture as much of that as possible.
Yeah. That's the place for co-designing again. And
exactly.
So some rapid fire questions. So where would you first allocate resources if you were to get a $200K unrestricted grant right now, today?
I would go find a space.
Okay, I was going to tell you, besides the space, let's say not space, then let's go to the next stage.
That's the thing. Material, space, and equipment, I'm not too, that's kind of available. I'm not too worried about that stuff. I would use that funding to try to identify, and people resources to help get involved in this. I'm personally, I'm kind of a builder, and once something's built, I like somebody else to come run it. So I think eventually, we'll want to pay an executive director. A lot of these labs don't, but I think it's really important that you've got somebody who's a staff person who does that. So I don't know if that's the first thing I'd go pay for, but I think building out the volunteer and human resource of this would be really super helpful. And maybe spend some time and effort visiting some of the other labs and see how they're doing things and learning from them. I've spent some time in Baltimore and some time in Brooklyn, but there's other places. So probably learning more. Yeah,
learning more. So evaluation, probably think about mechanisms. Is there community, like a network for community biolabs that you've now?
Yeah, so there is. So for many years, there was this community biology summit that happened every year, and it was run by a group out of MIT. And after COVID, it became virtual, but for first few years, it was live. So we're all sort of now loosely connected. There are some meetings that happen amongst some of the groups, but back to your question about the funding, maybe I would try to pull that back together, because I think it's really super valuable. We all have so much to learn from each other, and mistakes that have been made by one group can be used as information for another. So yeah, that would be something I might try to pull back together. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. It seems to have dissipated. You know what? I think I do know. I think it was, again, run by volunteers, and people just got kind of burned out. And so now it's not happening. It's a shame, because it was really, really quite valuable. And that's how I met Jen Space and Boss Lab and all the rest of them.
Yeah, because sustainability is always a challenge, right?
Absolutely.
How do you keep it going?
How do you keep it going? And that's true for really anything worth doing. You need to build a sustainability model, and that's something that we need to do as well. I'd like to get going and off the ground a little bit more before that happens, but we will need one, because I'm not going to do this forever.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And so earlier you brought this thing up about lessons learned, right? So thinking about some scientists watching this later and thinking, oh, how would I get going and bring a community biolab to my community? Thinking back to the earliest days, can you just share some lessons that you learned early and are still learning right now? What are those things that comes to mind at top?
Access your networks. I think it's really, really super important to build and maintain a network of people who you can go to, or who can come to you to share ideas and advice. I mean, it's really key. I pulled in a lot of people to make this thing happen, including, for example, we needed legal help, and getting the legal paperwork done and getting the organization established. Made connections with the Community Law Center at Northeastern through the networks, things like that. So use the networks that you have, and don't be shy to ask, and learn from the models, learn from what people have already done, and don't feel like, oh, I know the best way to do this, I'm going to do it my way. Learn from, people have done this before. Don't reinvent the wheel. So that was definitely something that can be learned from this. Yeah. And also, sorry.
Surprising?
For me, I maybe be careful about overestimating what you can do and are capable of doing in a short period of time, and allow yourself to, if you need to pull back a little bit, do that. Also, learn. For me, I've had to learn that maybe not everybody shares the passion for it that I have, and they may be interested in getting involved and helping out a little bit, but they're not going to, maybe they're not going to be the driving force, or maybe they've only got limited time, because people have limited time. So, be patient with the people that you've brought in.
Yeah, because your team right now, how big is your team right now?
I have 5 board members.
Okay.
And then I would say I have loosely a team of about 10 or 15 folks in our volunteer network that I can call on. So on our website, there's a page there where you can volunteer. And so what I do is I periodically, I pull new people in, have a little meeting with them, and say, okay, if we're having an event, I'm going to put out a broadcast email, and anybody who come, I'll say, I need 4 volunteers for this. And so I probably have 10 or 15 people on that list right now.
I see.
So the leadership group is probably about, I would say it's 5 people.
I see. And Don, is there a metric that, when things are set up and running smoothly and things are kicking, is there a metric that you say we need this to be moving in this direction to know that we're having an impact? Have you thought about that yet?
Yeah, I mean, I come from sort of a metrics driven world, and and it's always been one of those things like, yeah, I'll get to it. I mean, how many events do we have? How many people show up? How many people have we actively engaged? I mean, that's about as much as we can do right now. In my other world where I'm building these internship programs, we count things like, what are they doing after the internship program? What's their career path look like? Stuff like that. We're not quite there with LynnLab, but I do like to sort of have an understanding of how many students we've engaged, what age levels. Again, we're still working in sort of the school age groups right now, but I would like to start engaging adults. So yeah, metrics definitely something on the table there, but not very well defined.
Not very well. But let's just move forward. Let's say you do have the setup and the facilities and everything, right? You move beyond science outreach. Now you have the makerspace. Is there metrics that you now say, okay, we need to be tracking X, Y, and Z? I
would say, again, it's if we're reaching out to the community, somehow measuring what's our level of community involvement, like how many people show up.
Okay.
And then, I would say people hate filling out surveys, but we would probably put out, because you can learn from them, right? What do we do right? What do we do wrong? What would you like to see? I would like to have more metrics around what people want. The thing is that for a lot of people, this isn't anything they've actually ever thought about before very much. So it's hard to ask people what programs would they want to see if they haven't oh, this is something that's real. This is something you can think about and do. So it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you. Metrics are key here, and we'll be developing them as we develop. This is an evolution.
Right. And then I think you started off at the beginning talking about Lynn being bio-ready. Right.
Yeah.
And then when we were talking to GenSpace, they didn't use that term bio-ready, but there's this whole sort of biotech, right, ready, enabling the community to be biotech ready, that they also are having that kind of conversation. So I can imagine to the programming you might be developing in the future, right, that tracking piece you were talking about in your other endeavor, you probably would be doing the same thing.
So the bio-ready, that's a term that is come up with by Mass Bioed, which is it's a quasi, it's a nonprofit organization based, formed by many of the different biotech companies. And everybody wants to jump on this biotech bandwagon, right? And I'm a little concerned about this because right now, if most people may be aware, we're in a bit of a slump, and so it's a cycle. It's cyclical. It'll come back. I'm not too concerned about that. But everybody sees this huge growth that's going on in some cities. And so cities like Lynn and Lowell and the gateway cities who have all this infrastructure and all this building spaces that need to be filled, everybody wants to jump on board. And there's limited capacity at the end of the day. So, I think Lynn's got some unique qualities. It's close to the airport. It's got public transportation, that sort of thing. But, what we're not planning to be is like an apprenticeship program or a training program for biotech. I know those are very important programs, and there are some excellent ones out there. There's one in Gloucester, the GMGI folks have a great training program, Mass Bio, Lab Central. There's some great programs out there for that purpose. I'm less interested in like creating workers for that system than I am, and which is important. But the more of a driver for me is just to have people start thinking more with a mind of a scientist a little bit, being more curious, in embracing curiosity. Because to me, the main characteristic of being a good scientist is being curious. And so I really want to like sort of build that curiosity that folks have. And the biological world is a great place to be curious around. So we sort of use that as a model for like increasing people's curiosity, just in general. Yeah. And if it leads to careers and jobs or whatever, that's great. But that's not what we're after.
Yeah, and it's good that you shared that aspect, because each community biolab will have its own identity.
Right.
Looping them all into one, I think, doesn't make sense. Right. Yeah. Everybody will approach these problems based on the local community and the needs that are there.
Right.
So Don, I can keep talking with you. I think we are at earliest stages here, and
yeah, we are. Yeah, I hope you weren't expecting a whole lot more from me right now. But
no. I think this is an interesting thing. Like, watch this, basically kind of a summary. Like, watch this space. Watch this space. Yeah. Watch us. we're getting into it. And,
Yeah.
and I think you brought up some good points about bringing the community together, right? Again, sounds like continuing that momentum more broadly, right? The community biospaces.
Yeah,
So
definitely like to do that. And, for folks that are watching, anybody that wants to help or get involved, I'm all ears. I'm very open to this. This is, I kind of started this thing, but, I don't have I like to think I don't have a ton of ego tied up to it. And I'm glad to hear for new ideas and get people involved with it, because that's the critical success factor. It really is.
And I think even the scholars too, the folk that are studying the science engagement more broadly, I think you have an interesting case study here in a way, right, with what you're setting up locally in Lynn. So again, watch this space.
Right. I don't know if you know Justice Toshiba Walker down at the University of Texas. Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah. No, he's somebody to look for in this space. He does a lot of work around community labs and their impact. So check him out. Yeah.
All right. There's a ton of information here, Don. Thank you so much. Looking forward to having you back sooner versus later.
Yeah, it's great. I'd love talking to you. Thanks. Good to talk to you.
Awesome.